Well, what did you think of Kansas City?
Oh, I very much liked it. I was very pleasantly surprised. I kept my mind open. I wasn't thinking to expect anything. I have maybe some like flyover state judgments because I like grew up on the two sides of the country, but
Mm-hmm.
you have hyped it up so much and you love it there so much and you've like grown to find all your favorite places there and yeah, I was very excited to see your new home and
Mm-hmm.
see how wonderful it is. And it was so wonderful. I loved all the restaurants we went to and the stores and the coffee shops. And yeah, it was really lovely. I really enjoyed it. And of course, I really liked seeing you.
Yeah, it was a great weekend. I
Yeah.
needed a I needed like a forced break, and so it was nice to like have you be our first guest and just be able to like go
Yeah.
out to dinner again and like spend time doing the things that I like to do in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite place that we went to eat?
The Antler Room. Easy. I'm
Yeah,
still thinking about the lamb. What is it? The lamb ragu capitelli?
Cavatelli. Cavatelli? I
Cavatelli?
can't
Capitelli?
remember. I think I can't
They're
remember
like
which one it was.
little tortellini-esque,
So good.
little baby bites. Oh my God. I woke up the next morning thinking about them and I haven't stopped since.
It's so good. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Jeff, I told you, but Jeff took me there when I came to visit when we were long distance. And I was like, oh, this exists here. Maybe I could move here.
I don't think I told you this, but somebody I know messaged me when I posted that we were there on Instagram and was like, "Oh my God, my friend bartends there."
Really?
And I was like, "What?"
Oh, that's funny. I'll
Yeah.
make friends with that
You
person.
should. You should. Also, the drinks were really good. So the bartender did an amazing job. They
Thank
have
you,
a
bartender.
Michelin star or they have a
No,
James Beard Award or something.
I think that so it's a husband and wife chef team, and I
Oh,
think that they have a James Beard Award. If not, they were definitely nominated. But yeah, so effing good.
so good. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
definitely a highlight in terms of where we ate.
hmm Agreed. It's one of
Yeah.
my favorite places. And I didn't take you to I don't know, I have a few favorites obviously. There's one that if you come back we can go do like a fancy dinner.
Mhm.
It's called the Town Company and it's in the
Okay.
Hotel Kansas City and it's just so freaking good.
Mm.
Yeah, when we've been there a couple times now, but it's so effing good.
Yeah.
But like I'm such a food person that it was really important for me that I live in a place where there's good
Yeah.
food, very good
Yeah.
food. And so yeah, I feel like I came at the right time cuz a lot of these places are like newer and
Yeah.
yeah, I love them.
Oh my God. Okay, different subject, but I have to tell you about this. We started watching what's his name? Ramit, Ramit,
Ramit, Seth,
Sethi's.
I will teach you to be rich.
Ah,
Yeah, I mean, I have his book and I
it's
like swear by his book. I haven't watched the show, but Jeff has watched the show.
I've really been enjoying it. It's pretty good. I'm enjoying knowing what people's debt is like and how much money they make and like just
Yeah.
getting a peek behind the curtain, but also like especially Lacey has talked so much about how he changed the way she thought about money
Mhm.
way back in the day. And so I've like thought about him a lot, but I've never dug into his principles and his work. And so now there's the Netflix show and it feels like so much more accessible and the things that he says are so smart and like clearly he's changed so many people's perspectives around money and how they handle money and like I love this idea of like creating your own rich life that it's not about
Mhm.
just like I'm going to teach you how to like have more, but I'm going to actually teach you how to like feel fulfilled with what you have. And that
Yeah.
feels so right to me.
Mhm.
So I've really been enjoying the show. Did you
Yeah.
like reading the book?
Yeah, I mean, I like swear
Yeah.
by the book. I use the book.
Yeah.
I have all these little it's all highlighted and then I have little post-it notes on the outside and like I pick it up whenever I'm like reevaluating my expenses and
Mm.
yeah. The book is I Will Teach You to Be Rich. It's like $10 on Amazon and I recommend it to everyone. I've bought it for like 3 people. just because
You haven't bought it for me.
I
I'm going to buy it
haven't,
for
but you
me right
haven't
now.
seemed like you wanted it. But yeah, I mean, yeah. His whole idea is creating your own rich life. And so, like, what are your priorities? What do you want to put money into and what do you want to hold back on? And like, that's just so important because, like, some people want to spend $1,000 on a sweater and want to spend like $2 on food. And his whole thing is like, that's fine.
Yeah.
And
I'm
yeah. So,
I'm
like,
buying it
no,
right now. I'm buying 2
buy it.
copies. I'm going to give
Yeah.
one to my boyfriend too.
Perfect. Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. And there's so many really, everything is tangible. Everything is tangible. He has his preferences on banks, on credit cards. He teaches you like best practices with paying off student loans. And yeah, so just it's an incredible resource, especially if you're new to budgeting or thinking about money, but also even like if you've been doing it for a long time. I feel like his way is just like really intuitive and makes sense.
Yeah. I pride myself off of feeling like I'm really good with money. I've kind of taught myself everything that I know, but like I've used the internet and like YouTube and like just acquired a lot of knowledge over the years, but so like I'm not a newbie at budgeting, but I really like his perspective about
Mm,
money, and I feel like having someone kind of workbook it out for you so you can really see like how you're spending your money and is it in alignment with who you really are and what your principles are. Like I find that so helpful.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's great.
I'm really psyched. I'm psyched.
I'm
I
psyched
just
for
bought
you.
it. It's done.
Good.
Welcome to When We Like to Know.
With Ariel.
And Linda, the podcast where we get honest, deep, and curious about life's big conversations.
Because we don't have to do it alone.
No, we don't. Ariel, what are we talking about on the podcast today?
Today on the podcast, we are talking about opinions and
Ooh.
differing opinions. How much do we take other people's opinions into account when we're making decisions? And we get into some micro and macro level things around feeling defensive and feeling like an opposing opinion can be personal, and how can we find context there, and how can we fix the world?
That's right.
So we figure all that out, and that's done now.
Listen to the end for all the answers.
Yeah.
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 If you like what you hear, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at Wouldn't We Like to Know. We post videos of ourselves on there. We post little pics of ourselves on there. We posted some pictures recently about our trip to Kansas City. Well, my trip to Kansas City to see Ariel.
Mm-hmm.
So follow us at Wouldn't We Like to Know.
Yep. You can also watch us on YouTube and subscribe over there, and send us an email. Wouldn't we like to know at gmail.com. Send us all of your differing opinions. Ha ha ha. Ha
Yes.
ha ha. Yeah. Whatever. Just, it's fine. Okay, everybody. We will see you on the other side.
I have some exciting news for the pod
What?
listeners.
Oh.
Well, you already know this.
Oh, yes.
So Ariel, we're together this last weekend. Well, I guess it's longer than this last weekend now. My God, time has flown. It's been about a week since we last saw each other. But when we were together, I did my official Pilates test out with Ariel, and I got my results back, and she passed.
She passed.
Which was so exciting. So if you listen to our last episode, you hear me being a little pessimistic, Penny, negative Nelly, Nancy, all nervous about not passing and really trying to manage my own expectations about whether or not I was going to pass. But I did pass, which is super, super exciting.
Yeah,
and
you did.
Ariel was a wonderful example student to do my test out with.
I was a little mannequin.
She was a little mannequin. I moved her around with my words.
Yeah. It was funny though, because the woman that was doing the test out
Yeah.
would be like, Good. Yeah, good. Wink, wink, wink. Like that's that. Uh-huh. I
Uh-huh.
cannot confirm or deny whether you're doing well, but like, okay. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the
Good
end you
job.
were
Good
like,
job.
I think I failed, or like, I don't know if I did this right or did that right. And I was like, she basically told you that you passed.
She
Okay.
said you have nothing to worry about, but
She quote unquote.
my reaction to that was, what if she just doesn't 11:11? It's 11:11, everyone. That's my lucky number.
Mm,
My reaction to that was like, well, what if she's actually lying to me because she doesn't want to hurt my feelings? And the reality is that I'm not doing well, but she doesn't have the heart to tell me.
right.
Which
Yeah.
is like I trust that this woman is secure enough in herself that she wouldn't mislead me like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't trust that I am doing well enough.
Yeah. When you heard
Yeah.
you have nothing to worry about, you were like, I have to worry now.
Why are you bringing up worrying? I wasn't thinking about that.
How dare you? Now that's all I'm doing.
No, it's the only
Yeah.
thing I could think about. Yeah.
But you did it. You passed.
Yeah. It was also very interesting listening back to the last episode and noticing how negative I was being, or just like how, well, maybe not negative is not the right word, but how I was really trying to manage my own expectations about passing. Like, I didn't want to get my hopes up. I didn't want to talk too much about, like, oh, like, I'll be a Pilates instructor by the time you guys are listening to this episode, because what if I didn't pass, and then how embarrassing? But if I tell you guys that I know that there's a good chance I won't pass, then if I don't pass, it's less embarrassing. It's like me protecting my ego a little bit and not
Yeah.
letting myself get too excited, especially publicly
Mm-hmm.
with
Yeah.
the pod,
Yeah.
to make sure people know that I'm not crazy. Like, I know I can put myself in my own place. Like, you don't need to do it for me.
Mm.
That's kind of
Yeah.
how it felt when I was listening back to the episode.
And that's a really funny thing, especially with having something public like a podcast. Is like, there is a voice in the back of my head that's like, do I want to share this thing? Do I want to share that thing? And I think to an extent, that's a really healthy voice to have because,
Yeah.
like, no, I don't need to share everything for public consumption, but also, like, the tone that we're setting with this podcast is like showing up even when things are messy, and that does not again mean that we need to share everything, but also it's like we can be excited about certain things and like nervous, and if something doesn't pan out the way that we want it to pan out, like that's okay. This podcast is about love, and we've never received we've never received any kind of negative.
No.
The most
No.
negative stuff we receive is from freaking random companies we don't know being like, grow your following. Like, do you know what you're doing
Yeah.
wrong? And I'm like, leave
Yeah.
us alone. You
It's
don't
like
know
social
us.
media agencies and stuff. Yeah. But
Yeah.
off of what you're saying too, like, this podcast is about love, and it's literally called Wouldn't We Like to Know? Like, we're not supposed to know, and it's okay to change our minds. It's okay to fail at things. Like, I was saying this to Jordan, my boyfriend, when we were skiing, and he was saying it to me too, of like, if you fall, great, you found your growth edge. Like, that's amazing. You pushed yourself to your edge and you found like where there's more space to grow. And I feel like it's like that in the podcast too, of like, okay, we can be vulnerable, we can talk about like things that we're not good at, and it's okay to fail. But like, I think it's easier to say than to actually integrate. Like, it's easy for
Mhm.
me to say that and like want that to be the case. It's hard for me to feel like I actually give myself the permission to do that, because there is part of me that maybe believes that like I'm not good enough, and
Mhm.
me achieving or me like doing things makes me feel like therefore I am good enough. But without all of that stuff, if I fail, it might actually prove my belief about myself right. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, it's hard to fail
Yeah.
in public.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is. And I think we have
it's
so
really
many
scary.
examples of people that have failed, like celebrities or whoever, that there's been this cancel culture or, certain things that they've quote unquote failed at that maybe are bad. Like, like more, maybe morally are bad. And so they're canceled. Or maybe it's something silly and they're canceled for that, or whatever it is. But to like fail in front of a huge group of people,
Mm,
it's like we have this built in scary thing that that's going to be us.
right.
And I don't know. I think that, at least for myself, I'm trying to make the biggest judge and jury be myself.
Mhm.
And again, that's so much easier said than done. But I also think, like, if we were to do something crazy on this podcast, or not even that crazy, but say something and it turns into this thing down the line that gets picked up and it wasn't PC, or it was, it ends up being a thing that's wrong to say. Like, I have enough compassion for myself and enough compassion for most other people, I think, like if I think hard enough about it, that I would be able to, see it as a learning experience and know that I can do better in the future. But I don't know. That's all coming from things that have not happened yet and hopefully
Yeah.
won't happen, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
But I agree, and I like that feeling of like I am my highest authority, you know? Like I can trust my own gut and my own instinct of like, does this feel good and right to me and true to me? Then yes, and it's okay if people don't understand it. Like I've been thinking a lot about it in the context of, and I was trying to think about how I wanted to talk about this when you were talking, but like I have not a good relationship with one of my roommates. And it's been quite challenging, even just energetically. It hasn't been like the most warm environment. And I often think about how it doesn't feel good to not be liked by this person, especially this person who's like very much in my space. And I've been thinking a lot in the last few weeks about how then I also don't like how I feel like their friends probably don't like me.
Mm.
Because I'm assuming that this person's probably not speaking very highly of me, even if it's just in venting, how like conversations of like how you are supposed to talk to your friends. I don't know how she talks about me, but I would assume that her friends probably don't have the most positive impression of me. And even just having them around the house and like saying hi to them and like trying to be friendly, and they've always been very very nice back. So like nothing, no judgments on them at all. But it's curious how I notice really wanting to be liked by them and kind of wanting to prove the negative conversations that I'm assuming are happening about me in my head, wanting to prove those theoretical conversations wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of having to remind myself that my worth is not based on the opinions of these random other people. My worth is based on what I like, my judgments of my actions, and like, do I feel okay with how I've behaved? Do I feel okay with the person that I am? And if the answer to that is yes, then like other people's judgments of whether or not I am, you know, this is a very black and white thinking, but like good or bad, they don't matter because like who knows what their guide is for deciding whether or not is someone is good or bad. And like if that lines up with my
Mm-hmm.
guide of what I feel like is good or bad for me, and just like trying to let go of the desire to want those other people to like me or
Mm-hmm.
prove to them that I'm actually a good person when I'm assuming that there's like negative things happening in conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just been like thinking about that a lot recently of like, okay, am I okay with the way that I've behaved? Yes, then I don't really even care if I'm being
Mm-hmm.
portrayed as something else because I know who I am and that's what matters. And like I care about the opinions of the people that are closest to me. Like I care about your opinion, I care about my mom's opinion. Like I care about a select group of people who I've decided, okay, these are people that will hold me accountable. These are people that will like make sure that I'm in integrity. And these are people that I trust what their definition of that is. And it's in
Mm-hmm.
alignment with my definition. So it's not like I don't care what anybody thinks. I certainly care what some people think, but like it's important to me to really pick and choose carefully who those people are.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the same goes for the pod. Like that's kind of the connection for me of why I brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, yeah, it's really hard when we don't have control of the narrative. Like, I've been in situations where I have felt really misunderstood and have wanted to like set the record straight or be like, that's not what I'm like. Like, this is
Right.
actually, that wasn't my intention. This was actually my intention. And
Right.
you don't know me well enough to know that, like, you're not assuming the good in me. And it's really hard to let go of. I don't know. I think just like in general, as human beings, one of our biggest things is wanting to be seen and understood.
Yeah.
And when that doesn't
Yeah.
happen, that's fucking hard.
Yeah.
And then what you're saying is, who are we choosing in our lives that matter? Like, who are we choosing to invite into our inner circle that actually see who we are, and they can hold us accountable if they are seeing something different or strange, and who can we trust? Because it's not going to be everybody. But that's really hard. I've been in those situations where I'm just like, this is so frustrating, and I feel like I want to just hold a meeting and let these people know, like, that's not what I'm
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. I
And
want to
then,
show them my like pitch deck of why I'm not like that.
right. And then
Yeah.
it's like, well, you know what? That's not my business.
Right.
It's not my
Right.
business. If they think that about me,
Mm.
that's not my business. But it's
Right.
hard.
Right. And I think about this too. Like I can assume that the people who are reasonable people will hear the stories about me and assume that there's another side to it. They will see how I actually behave. They will see who I am in their own timing. Or maybe they won't because they won't there won't be time for that. There won't be investment in that. But that's okay too. Oh, yeah, and as it relates to the pod, like you said, we've gotten nothing but like super super positive feedback about our conversations. And so it's interesting to notice this feeling about myself. Not it's not coming from it's not this is actually not coming from outside of myself because there is a fear that there's going to be rejection from outside of myself, from the pod community, from our listeners who've been nothing but lovely to us. So I'm just
Mhm.
assuming this judgment about myself that doesn't actually necessarily exist.
Mhm.
I mean, we've gotten all positive feedback except for there's one 4-star review on freaking Spotify. And I don't know who did that, but to give us a 4-star review is just about the meanest thing you could do. Like, it's worse than a 1-star review because I know if you did a 1-star review, you really didn't like us. But you like kind of liked us, but you kind of wanted to fuck with us too. Like you fucked up our 5-star rating. It's just the one 4-star rating. And that's rude. Whoever you are, you know who you are. Fix it.
I've
Fix it.
left a 4-star review before.
Okay, Little Miss Airbnb, you should know better.
No, I
What
left
does
a
it
4-star
mean?
review. Okay, here's the context.
Okay,
It
give us
was
the context.
for a Bethany Frankel podcast. I'm a
Yeah.
Bethany Frankel stan. I love
Yeah.
that bitch. She's
Yeah.
hilarious, and I also think she's very emotionally intelligent, and I just love her. Real Housewives of New York.
Mm.
And I was listening to this podcast, and she was chatting with all these different guests, and it was called, I think it was Rewives. It's like shifted to something else now, but they would watch these like iconic episodes from the Housewives, and they would kind of break it down psychologically and relate it to their own lives. And I'm like, this is exactly what I enjoy doing.
Mhm.
And so she would have people on the podcast. The reason that I gave it 4 stars and I wrote a thing is that I was like, I love the content of this. I'm loving exactly what this is about, but
Mhm.
your sound quality is so shitty. And like, it's
Oh.
very hard for me to listen because Bethany will be speaking and it'll be a very different volume and tenor than like this other person that's speaking. And it's obvious that
Mm.
you're whatever.
She needs a
And
better producer.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like for me as someone who has a podcast and who understands like audio setup and how easy it can be to fix audio,
Yeah.
I was like, fix this one fucking thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I left 4 stars, but I don't know why someone else left us 4 stars. But either way, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like something that somebody could write or say that would
No, but
really
they
hurt
didn't.
me. Right.
And
And
they
they didn't.
couldn't because it was on Spotify, and you can't write reviews on Spotify, you can only star rate. So there was a reason, but, like, you could okay, if it's you, email us. Tell us why. Give
I
us
mean, I don't
an
really
explanation.
care. I don't think that, I think 4 stars is fine.
I know,
Like,
I don't really actually care either. I'm
yeah,
just, d doing a thing, but
just
yeah.
doing a bit, doing a
Yeah,
bit.
doing a bit. Yeah, it, like, really doesn't bother me. I don't think about it very often, but when I
It
do,
cuts to the core of you.
oh my god, I
It
get so
cuts to
mad.
the
No.
core.
I just don't really get it. I'm like, "Why'd you give us 4?" Like, we're so close.
There was someone early on,
Mhm.
I don't know if they still listen to the podcast, but they would talk about, this is like a friend of a friend that
Okay.
happened to listen. I've told you about this, but this person was like, "Well, you guys talk a lot at the beginning before the guest comes on. Like, I don't think that you should talk that much." And I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like,
I remember that.
"My darling, this is what the podcast is. So if you don't like it, either skip forward or maybe stop listening. And maybe it's not for you. And
Yeah,
that's fine.
yeah.
But like, that's not what we're doing here. Like, you're expecting a different podcast, and that's not what's happening."
In this audio medium, they sure do talk a lot.
They talk a
Turn it
lot.
off. Turn it off.
Yeah. I think this person just wanted us to get to the guest, and I was like,
Right.
"Okay, so skip forward." I don't
Yeah, or
know.
just, like, go to that guest's Instagram or something, like, if you
Yeah,
only want them and not us, then go. Go be free.
be free.
Go be free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sending you light and love.
Yeah.
But also, I was like, this is it. But again, it's like, what feedback am I going to let in?
Yes.
That's not the
Yes.
kind of feedback I'm going to let in, because, we've chosen a very specific way to have this podcast, and it's with you and me
Mm,
chatting. And
right.
that's the concept of the podcast. So we're
Yeah.
not going to get rid of that. If it was something else constructive that felt like, "Oh, okay, that's something that we can take into account,"
Yeah.
then yes. But something like that, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean anything to me."
Exactly. You gotta pick and choose whose feedback you listen to. You can't listen to everybody's feedback.
Yeah. And I'll come back to the quote of, "Don't take advice from somebody whose life you don't want,"
Mm.
just
Mm.
consistently.
Sometimes I notice this about myself. I catch myself asking for advice from people whose advice I don't actually want.
Mm.
Like, I will, as I'm asking them, be like, "This is not a person whose opinion I trust on this." And then I notice myself get frustrated when they give me advice that's not good.
Yeah.
I
What
do
do you
this
think
with
that's
one specific person.
what do you think that's about? Like, why do you think you ask them?
Well, I think it's because I want support. Like, I don't know what to do, and so I'm just kinda like, "Well, maybe this time it'll be a bit different," and, like, they will give me good advice, and, like, every once in a while they do. They definitely do, but most of the time they don't, and it's about, like, certain topics too. Like, this person, I know that there are certain things that they're just not knowledgeable on, and, like, nobody is knowledgeable on everything, and, like, that's why you have a community. You don't just have one person in your life, right? You, like, talk to that different people about different things. But yeah, I think it's like I just want support. And like if I'm talking to them, maybe I'm talking to them on the phone or in person, like they're already right there in front of me and this is the thing I'm going through, so I kind of want to talk about it, but it's not productive.
Mhm.
I just want to feel like I'm not alone in it
Mhm.
and I want to fix it. And instead of just going and finding the resource that's actually helpful, it's like a little spiral. 'Cause then I'm frustrated because they gave me bad advice, and I know it's bad advice, but they don't know it's bad advice because it's their advice.
Mhm.
and I'm judging their advice to be bad. It's not good for me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something to think about. Like,
Yeah, I think it's triggering for me with this person specifically. Sometimes like you talked about
mm,
this earlier too. It's like what do we decide to talk about and what do we not decide to talk about on the pod? Like what are we comfortable sharing and what are we not comfortable sharing? And I feel like I walk that line very closely because a lot of the stuff that we talk about does relate to our personal lives in one way or another. And we can blind it to a certain extent, but like there's some amount of guessing that you can do if you want to do it. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Especially with people who know like a good amount of information about our lives. But I was feeling this way even about the friendship episode of like, I don't want all my friends who listen to the pod to now be guessing about who I don't want to
Mm,
invest as much time in anymore. Like,
yeah.
I now have a vulnerability hangover.
Vulnerability hangover.
Yeah.
That's it. That's correct.
After sharing, because like, I'm like, oh, did I share too much? Did I like talk about it so vaguely that other people are going to think I'm talking about them and I'm actually not talking about them at all? And like, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings if it is about them. And like, maybe if I just don't talk about it, then then I won't hurt their feelings. I'll just like kind of fade into the background quietly. But like,
Mm-hmm.
the point of the pod is that most people feel these things at one point in their lives. So we can all relate to it. We're not alone.
Yeah.
But
And
it
then the
feels
hope,
very vulnerable.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then also the hope is that if you have friends that feel that way and you have like a good relationship, that they, if they're worried about it, then they ask you, you know what I
Right.
mean? Or like,
Right.
you know, if they think, oh, it could be me, then they can navigate it the way that they want to navigate it. Like
Right.
I don't know. I had that worry early on. Like that was one of the things we talked about in the first episode. I was like, I'm worried that I'm going to share something and people are going to assume that I'm talking about them or
Yeah.
whatever. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of this, what we're doing is like giving examples, giving like parables almost, like
Mm.
a little glimpse of a story. And it doesn't really matter who it's about. Like it doesn't matter.
My corporate brain was just like, yeah, blinded case study. But I
Exactly.
like a parable
Yes.
better. It's much more
Storybook
yeah,
folklore.
it's
Yeah.
much more colorful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think like doing the podcast has almost broken my give a fuck. Like to an extent. Like obviously there are certain things I'm not openly going to share, but it's definitely been like, oh, that's not my business. Whoever takes what I have to say and runs with it in a direction that I didn't mean for it, it's not my problem, you know? And if they want to talk about it with me, then like reach out to me and we can talk about it. Like I'm open to having any kind of conversation in that way, but like I would think that the people that really know me, they're not worried about it.
Right. Yeah.
Also on the
You're right.
advice stuff, it's funny because I've been thinking about that lately too. I am I have pretty much always been the kind of person that will just make a decision on my own and just run with it.
Yeah.
And
Which is hilarious because I have two like really, really, really close best friends, you and somebody else, and you're polar opposites in that, which is
mm,
fascinating.
mm, yeah,
Like I
that
know
is
that about you.
interesting.
Like you're not gonna like ruminate over a decision and like ask me a bunch of questions about if I think you should do it. You're just gonna decide and then you'll like let me know later that you did this thing.
Hmm.
I have another really close friend who is more of like an information gatherer. And so she'll like talk to everybody in her circle about the thing and then she'll make her decision. But I just find it very fascinating how different you guys are in that aspect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that's so interesting about friends in
Yeah.
general, like all the different kinds of friends that you can have, and like what's the common denominator and all that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I have historically not been a person that's like outsourced for information. Like I will do research on certain things, and if it's something that I know that somebody else in my life has experience with, then I'll chat with them about that. But for the most part, even like going shopping or like choosing a place to go on vacation, like whatever it is, like I'm very much thinking in my own head of what is it that I want to do. But I do a lot of like, I like to talk it out, but I
Mm.
like to come to my own conclusion.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I've been thinking about that. I don't know that that is always, I don't know if it always serves me to do that, to do things on my own. Like, obviously, there are moments where like having a community and like reaching out for advice is the best thing that you can do. And so it just makes me examine like, when is what is good and what is bad? Not that I want it to be black and white, but like, where's the gray in between area? And like, when, am I preventing myself from connection or risking coming to a different conclusion? Or there was this other part of me that was like, am I not asking or sharing certain things because I don't want to be swayed? Like, I think that I was talking to my therapist about this. There are certain things that I'm very, very precious about, and I want it to be like just my thing, like just a thing that I'm choosing on my own. And I don't want any outside influence to come in and like give me any other kind of information that would make me change my mind about it. Like, even with this Airbnb business, like, yes, I'm in a course and I'm in a group and I have those people that are doing it and they have their own experience doing this. So that's super helpful. But I recognize that there's a certain amount of fear that if I talk to other people and I let their opinions in, then I will change my opinion. And
Mm.
that is an interesting thing to think about, because maybe those people have a point sometimes. And
Right.
maybe it's just like my ego or fragility or whatever that's like, I don't want to hear that. I just want to do my own thing.
Mm.
And I think like a lot of the times that's totally fine that I want to do my own thing. But there are some times where I'm like, oh, maybe I'm protecting this too much. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah, it does
Yeah.
make sense. Yeah. I'm
So
curious, like,
yeah.
what part of you, like, doesn't trust you to keep the same decision? Like, what part of you is so fearful about changing your decision if you let other people's voices in?
I don't know. That's a good question. Even with the Airbnb stuff, I feel like there have been a lot of people that have had like little comments to make and like, oh, it's, Airbnb is oversaturated and Airbnb is taking over homes that other people could live in, and it's causing prices to rise and all of those things. And to an extent they're true, but also, in I think maybe in my case I take it personally, where it's like,
Mm.
oh, you're second guessing me. You're second guessing my choice to do this thing. And
Mm.
I don't know. I think that there's like this fear that when I have the spark of an idea and I let somebody in too quick, that idea is just going to like fizzle and fade away. And I don't want that to happen. Like, I want to follow through on like the sparks that come to me, the pings that come to me.
Mm.
And there is this fear that if somebody, like some sort of negative voice comes in before I get the chance to follow through, then I won't follow through.
Mm.
So it's almost like I need to build up my own momentum it's like I need to build up my fortress before I can let any of that other negative shit in,
Mm.
because I already have so much negative self-talk in my own head that's trying to prevent me from doing this thing, that like
Yeah.
I don't have room for more.
Right. I kind of think about like a little seedling
Mhm.
that grows under the ground before it comes up to the air and like to the sky and to the sun. and the
Mhm.
environment, like, and all of the elements. Like, you need, like, the time that it takes the seedling to get from where it's planted through all of the soil, like, you need that time to grow your seed
Mhm.
alone and on your own, protected first before letting it out into the world.
Mhm. Yeah, that feels correct.
Yeah.
And talking to my therapist about it, she was like, I have a feeling that that will shift as you grow and as you get older and whatever. And she's like, it's not something that it's not like a negative or a positive thing right now. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
But I think that the real thing that I want is to be able to take in whatever opinion it is and then choose, oh, I'm not going to let that in, versus
Yeah.
completely blocking it out and being
Right.
like, this doesn't exist at all.
Right.
And that's like resiliency, is
Right.
I can hear it all, but I know what I want to do.
Right.
And I know what
Right.
I'm going to continue to do.
Do you think that the feeling of not, like, wanting to protect and not let other voices in, do you think that that has to do with recovering from codependency at all?
Maybe it's like the pendulum swinging the other way of like, I mean, a good portion of my life was spent like trying to make other people around me comfortable and trying to like cater
Right.
to the people around me. And so I think now it's like gone completely the other way. Not that I don't care about other people, obviously, but like it's really important for me now to protect who I am and
Yeah.
my stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that definitely factors in. Like even when thinking about having a kid, I'm like, ugh, I'm scared to have a kid because I don't want my life to completely shift into only being a caregiver,
Yeah.
because I did that. And
Right.
I also, like, most important is me taking care of myself, and it scares me to think about losing that.
Yeah.
And at this point it's an irrational thought because I have a partner that is so supportive and like so good with kids, and know that if ever I was feeling that way, that it I have a partner, that it would be a partnership. So
Right.
it's not a thing that I actually need to worry about. And if I go into it with the intention of like, I am here to protect this child and grow it into, you know, the most evolved human that I can help grow it into, while also prioritizing myself and
Yeah.
and being an example for the kid of prioritizing yourself while also caring about the people around you.
Yeah.
Like that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, possibly. I think that there's
Yeah.
like this layer of protection of like, I did that for a while and I don't want to do that again. I want to do me.
Right. I think that, yeah, that makes, I hear that in what you're saying too. That's why I asked just if that felt like it resonated, because it does feel like, oh, I spent so much of my life like living by other people's opinions and wanting to please other people. And now I've healed so much of that, where I see the value in my own opinion and forming my own opinion. And I like my own opinion and I like who I am. And like there's a fear of letting any of the, it's like a shutting out, right? It's not like a fear of like letting those other voices back in, maybe because you're like,
Mhm.
I don't want to go back to that other side of the pendulum.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such a big part of growth too, is like sometimes when we heal from something, we swing all the way. We've talked about the pendulum swinging a lot on this podcast, but not necessarily in this episode. Like we swing all the way to the other side. We kind of like overcorrect before we can like find the middle ground of like what is the most healthy for us. Like
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with that overcorrection because we're like learning a new skill. Like we're learning how to do something that we didn't learn as kids that would have been a really healthy habit. But there is that like process of it where we like overcorrect and then we kind of find that good balance. for us, and that
Mhm.
takes time. And, like, there's nothing wrong with the fact that you value your own opinions and you, like, don't want to care as much about what other people think, like, you just wanna decide for yourself. Like, that's a really beautiful way that you healed. And
Mhm.
also, it sounds like you have questions about, like, is this sometimes maybe harming connection or, like, limiting me from other possibilities by not letting in the thoughts of others? And, like,
Mhm.
there seems to be a judgment of, like, well, maybe they're judging my decision if they have a different opinion. And
Mhm.
it's like, it feels black and white then of, like, maybe they're right and I'm actually wrong, versus I've
Mhm.
just decided that this is right for me and their right is something else. And I do that
Mhm.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately what I want for my life, but also like the world, is for us to be able to hear an opposing opinion and not like run away,
Yeah.
but also not treat it as like a thing that needs to be changed or a thing that can change us. And like, where can we find the malleability to have a conversation? Because for a lot of my life, it felt like if there was ever an opposing opinion, it was like a threat to me.
Right.
It's like a threat to me and a threat to who I am. And
Right.
that is not how I want to live my life.
Yeah.
I want to be able to hear other people and decide, is this a conversation that I want to have or not? And, you know, gather information like in the broader theme of the world. Like, there's crazy shit going on. There's been crazy shit
Yeah.
going on since the beginning of the world, and wars, and just I think that I understand on a very micro level with myself that there are moments where an opposing opinion feels like it's a threat to me when it's
Right.
not. It doesn't
Right.
have to be. If
No.
I'm secure in myself and like open enough to be able to hear another person, like that's how we're going to heal.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that's a skill that is, like, very, I don't know how common it was before, like, we have the information, like, we have information everywhere nowadays, the internet, our phones, and, who knows, like, how divided we were before all of that. I wasn't around, but, like, it does feel like it's a skill that's becoming less and less common to be able to hear other people's opinions and really listen and be okay with disagreeing, and also seeing the value of other people's opinions, but then not having to take them on as our
Mhm.
own. And the I think part of the reason for that is because there is such, like, a, I don't know, it just feels like being right, like, it feels very I guess, what I'm trying to say is it feels very black and white, like, it feels very, there's a right and there's a wrong, and there is no gray area.
Mhm.
So, if I'm right and you're telling me that you're right and what you're saying is in direct opposition to what I'm saying, that means that you're actually questioning me as a person.
Mhm.
And if you're questioning me as a person, then maybe I am wrong. And then, like, that shakes the whole, like, core of my foundation. And I can't just hear what you're saying and be like, okay, I hear what you're saying. And, like, that's great too. But I have a different opinion on this.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
feels like, because it really does, like, shift people to their core. Like, I have in my, I even think, like, politically, like, obviously that's a big part of this. I have family, like, most of my immediate family thinks in one certain way. And then I have some extended family who really thinks in a polar opposite way. And there's a family reunion coming up, and there's someone in my family who just, like, refuses to go to the family reunion, not because they don't wanna go, or it's not because, like, it's inconvenient or because they don't wanna see anyone that's there, but because of the political opinions, and they just will, like, they refuse to go because they won't do it. Like, it's
Mhm.
there's such a big divide there that they can't even have conversations. They just kind of yell at each other. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so prevalent that it's seeped into like they can't even have a personal relationship because of these things. And like I understand values and like there's a difference in morals and like there's a difference in like these are really personal things and these are things that are of course very important to people, but like there's a lack of even being able to hear each other. There's a lack of being able to talk about it because it's so charged and it's so intertwined with like a sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody tells you that they have a different opinion, that you can't even go there. That's upsetting, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I don't want to get into a political conversation, but I think it's just that sense of like not being able to hear other people because they
Mm-hmm.
have a different opinion from you. They think it
Yeah.
should be done in a different way and that's a personal attack or it like comes across as a personal attack. It feels like a
Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
think that it turns into, as a person, you are right or you are wrong. As a
Right.
person, not even that opinion.
Right.
And that's hard to deal with. And I've been in
Yeah.
situations where there were times in my life where I felt the same thing. I was like, "Oh, you think this one thing politically, you're a no for me. Like I
Right.
can't even hear anything else that you have to say."
Right.
I have been that too.
Same. Yeah. I don't have all the
Yeah.
right answers. Like, I'm not saying I don't do this. I do the same thing, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just find it so fascinating to look at it and be like, why is it right and wrong? Why is it black and white? Why is there no gray? Why is there no room for the in between? Why is there no room for a scale? Like, why is
Yeah.
there no room to hear other people's opinions? Or to like, we get so triggered. We get like the second we hear that somebody else has a different opinion, we refuse to even talk about why they have that opinion. And like if
Mhm.
we do hear why they have that opinion, it becomes an argument about why they shouldn't have that opinion and why they should actually have my opinion. There's like so there's no actual listening.
Yeah.
It's just like clashing.
Convincing or like putting a wall up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to say this now, like not being in a conversation like that, but
Yeah.
I lived in San Francisco during the 2016 election. That was an interesting time for everyone, but it
Yeah.
also was like, oh, I have no idea what's going on outside of San Francisco. Like I just
Yeah,
didn't
such a
know.
bubble.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was such a growth moment for me where I try to be able to like see the context of other people and like you're feeling disenfranchised. God, that's a hard feeling to feel.
Yeah.
So many of the things come down to fear and come down to like historically what has gone on in your family, what has gone on from like the place that you came from, where you live. Like there's context to everyone. And I think that that's what's missing in these conversations. And even I was talking to my therapist about this again on a very micro level, something very personal to me in our last session. And this person that I'm like, they don't even try to understand me. And it's been interesting because talking about this specific relationship in my life where we have a lot of butting heads and it feels really uncomfortable for me. And I feel like this person doesn't make an effort to understand me. I can take a step back and try to understand the context of that person. I know how they grew up. I know where their parents came from and where their grandparents came from. And there's a reason that they act in the way that they act and that they can only do as much as they can do right now. And I want something different, but I also need to recognize that they may not have the capacity to give that to me. And so, like, what can I do to keep the relationship going while
Because that's
also
a desire that you
protecting
have.
myself?
Yeah.
Yes. Like, I don't
Yeah.
have to,
Right.
but I want to. And I also understand that just because we differ in a lot of ways and we have a lot of differing opinions doesn't mean that there's not value in that relationship.
Yeah.
And so, like, on a very micro level, I'm starting to understand how to have those kinds of conversations while also like protecting myself and being curious and trying to have compassion for another person. And like, I truly believe that that's the only way that anything is ever going to get done
In your relationship and yeah,
in my relationship,
in
in
any
the
relationship.
world,
Yeah.
like, is understanding that there's a difference in opinion
Yeah.
and like being able to zoom out and say, oh, this is what this other person is going through and has gone through. And that takes so much energy.
Right.
Like, it's a lot of work
Yeah.
on my part, on anybody's part that is in that situation of
Yeah.
being with someone with a different opinion that feels like it really is personal to you, to me,
Yeah.
and being able to make the choice of I want to see I want to see more of the context here, and I
Yeah.
want to choose the compassion versus just like there's a differing opinion and now you're dead to me.
Right. And it's also really hard, I think, when maybe you have that desire, but the other party doesn't have that desire. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is a whole other factor that comes into play of like, well, maybe I want to consider the whole being of who you are. I want to consider where you're coming from, but you don't have a desire to do that for me. And like, then how do we handle that? Like,
Yeah.
what are the boundaries? What are the guidelines that we put around our relationships when we have people telling us we're wrong all the time? Because that can also feel really triggering. But if you believe that you're not wrong, like that's still like that still feels like intertwined with like the triggering of that feels intertwined with some sort of like if there's a trigger that means there's like some sort of something there to look at. You know what I mean? Because like if somebody
Mm-hmm.
told you you were wrong about the sun coming out during the day, you just kind of laugh. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
like because that's so silly. But if they're telling you you're wrong about something, you're having a really strong reaction. Like I guess the only thing that you can do in that situation is like examine your own reaction and why you're feeling such a strong reaction because you can't control who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then like putting boundaries around that as is appropriate for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, like, don't put your hand on the stove all the time. You got
Yeah.
to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's something of value there. And when we get defensive, it's because we feel like we have something to defend. It's because we feel like we have something to lose.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's something I think about a lot. I can't remember if it was Liz
Yeah.
Gilbert or Glennon Doyle that said, like, whenever I feel myself getting defensive, I'm leaving myself. And so it doesn't always happen, but I like try to notice when I'm getting defensive and it's like, okay, what am I afraid of losing right now? And can that be taken from me?
Mm. I think that's a really beautiful question to end with.
Yeah. Let's be
Yeah.
done.
I'll be thinking about that.
Good.
Good.
All right, everybody. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
See you soon. Bye.